Okay, so let's get started if that's okay. Thank you so much for coming. For those who don't know me, my name is Cassie DeFillipo, and I am an instructor at Klamath Community College in Klamath Falls, Oregon. So my classes are multi-level because I work in a rural community. So one of the realities of that is not only do I have multi-levels, but I also have students with all different digital literacy levels and a lot of students who really struggle and use Zoom for the first time in my class. So that's where the inspiration for this presentation came from. So I'm going to share some of the games and activities that I do with my students to keep them engaged in class. First, I want to define gamification for you in case you don't know what it is. So 1 second, there we go. What is gamification? It is an approach to learning that incorporates game design elements to increase student motivation and engagement in class. And I think those two keywords are what I want to leave you with. It's all about student motivation and engagement. For me personally, my classes are 3 hours long and 4 days a week. So you need 3 hours is a long time to stay focused. So I find games are a really great way to keep students motivated, engaged, and able to kind of continue learning English after 1 hour and 2 hours in that really long class format. So going on with that, why gamify English classes? It makes it fun and interesting, of course. One really wonderful perk in my classes has been it creates connections between students. This has been one of the best parts of my classes. I just found out last week, some of my students are taking a vacation together. And then a group of 5 of them are planning a vacation next year. So they've created these beautiful bonds as a class. And part of that is because they have the time to enjoy learning and to do it together. In addition, it's a really great way to incorporate authentic materials into class lessons. If anyone isn't familiar with this word authentic, it's the idea of using materials using materials that we actually use in the real world in your English classes. So for instance, if you're talking about food, maybe using restaurant menus in class to actually look at how we actually use English on a regular basis. So a lot of the games I like to be inspired by are actually games we play in our culture, because it's actually a really great way for me to teach about our culture as well. So let me first, before we get into this, I want to introduce my classes to you. So in my classes right now, this term, the adults range in age from 18 to 72. I've had younger, I don't think I've had older, but for the most part, 18 to 72. So we have a lot of different life experiences and education experiences coming into the class. Some students have recently moved to the US. I've had a number of students who actually start my class their very first week in the US, and others have lived here more than 35 years. So very different knowledge levels about the US and spoken English when they come into class. At my institution, all of my English classes are high flex, which means that I am in the classroom and the students have the choice. They can attend in class or at home via Zoom, and they can choose daily which they prefer. So I have a feeling a lot of you might be in person or online. So we are a mix of both. And so I try to give some suggestions for I teach high flex, and so then hopefully my suggestions will help you whether you're in person or online. And then the last tip that's really important is that I would estimate, depending on the term, that about 75% of my students struggle and are uncomfortable using technology. Many of my students have used Zoom for the first time for my class. It is an ongoing problem, especially for the students who attend via Zoom, to try to get them to use the chat because they're not comfortable typing. They don't really know where the chat is. They also have issues with, okay. Patrick, I got your question. I'll try to come back to it. Yeah. They also have issues with how to move their view around their screen. So they'll say, I can't see your slides, and I have to try to explain how they move it around. So I am trying to continuously build digital literacy in my classes, and we have a number of programs and activities we're doing to build digital literacy, but sometimes using these games and doing it in a way that's easy for students who are uncomfortable with technology is a really great way to keep the class moving without the pauses that can come with trying to get every student comfortable with the technology for that particular activity. So I can show that as we go through my 5 suggested activities, but you'll see that each of them is something that the teacher will kind of control the technology so that it's easier for the students to enjoy the activity. So the 5 activities I'm going to talk about today, one second, are 1, Jeopardy, 2, Kahoot, 3, Word Wall, 4, Jenga, and 5, Bingo. So we'll talk about each of these activities one at a time. So the first one I want to discuss is Jeopardy. So I personally love to use this as a review activity, and it's become a staple in my class. It is a great way to prepare students for our chapter tests. So basically, we have a book that we work on. After we've finished reviewing it, we always play Jeopardy and then take the test. So it's the perfect way to prepare for that test. I also love it because it gives me a way to show and discuss authentic materials in class. So the first time we play it each term, we will discuss what Jeopardy is. We will talk about the history of Jeopardy. I will tell them it's a very challenging game and not the best show to watch sometimes because it's meant to be a really challenging show, even for English speakers. But I do show them a clip. I found a few clips that are a little easier. One of my favorites is, I think the category was like cartoon characters, and some of the answers were like Nemo, Belle, and so it wasn't like a lot of the students could actually answer them because they've seen those movies. And I did slow it down. We paused it and talked, but we were able to watch a clip from the show, discuss it, and now we play the game in class. I made it a little easier. We don't use the answer question format, but we use the slides to basically play the game. So let me actually show you an example of that. Let me make sure you can see that. Oh, shoot. Okay, perfect. Yes. All right. So here's the last chapter we worked on. It was goals and plans, and I chose 6 different categories. One is use in a sentence. They had to take a phrase that we had been studying and use it in a sentence. Then future tense, writing practice, where every person has to write a sentence. Pronunciation practice, both, neither, either, and then a review of comparative adjectives. So each time we play, the categories will change, but I love to have at least some writing practice, things like that. And when I play, because my class is high flex, I have 2 teams. So we don't play individually, we play in teams, which my students tend to love. So we have a home team and a classroom team. And they do, depending on the class, sometimes they really like it competitive, one against the other. Sometimes they don't care too much. It's just about the fun of it. So I kind of change it depending on the class and what they like. But they do play in teams. Sometimes if there's quiet people, I'll say, okay, only these people on these teams can answer this next question, just as a way to make sure that everyone can get involved. So when we play it, I always choose the first one and I say, okay, we are going to here. I've set it up so that all I have to do is click on it and then the phrase is in a little while. And they have to use that phrase in a sentence verbally. In order to be called on, the people at home could either speak, they would have to say me or ding, and or they could also, raise their hand at home as well. So I have the chat box up, I'm looking at the faces, and the classroom will be doing that as well. And then whoever got it first will answer the question. Their team will then choose the next question. So it's a really kind of fun game, and it starts moving fast sometimes as well, or slow, but it just becomes really fun for the class. They get into it. as I said, I ended up switching it so that I also give extra points. So if I were to go over to like writing practice, when they pick on those, or if they pick one of the writing practice ones, I'm going to have a question. They have to write a full sentence. And whoever in order to get the 200 points for this, the $200 for this, you have to write a perfect sentence in English. However, every student is going to write the sentence and you can get bonus points. So I found I've created my own rules to make it a little more fun for students. And I think everyone should do that. So I'm going to send you in the chat, basically the slides for this so that if you would like, you can create your own version. This was actually passed on to me from an event I went to years ago, and I've used it ever since. So now I'm passing it on to you to use as you see fit. Let me share it real fast. All right. And there you go. So, oh, there we go. Oh, yes, this would be great for citizenship. Yeah, that's actually a great idea. So I've sent that in the chat. Hopefully all of you have gotten it. As I said, I think it's such a fun game and my students have really loved it. So I don't think I would change it at this point just because it's such a staple in my class. All right, so I'm going to keep going if that's okay. But that is Jeopardy. The next game I'm going to show you, a lot of you might have seen before, it is Kahoot. Give me a thumbs up or something if you've played Kahoot before. It's really awesome and it's becoming really popular. So Kahoot are quizzes that can be used for multiple purposes in the classroom. A lot of people will play it where you can challenge students to answer each question using their phones. Because my students struggle with technology, the tip I'm going to give you today is how to practice all together to complete a group quiz and how we actually do that. So let me come over to Kahoot. Here it is. Here's my Kahoot page. And here are some quizzes that I have made. So I'm going to start by going to my acronyms quiz. This was something we did last term where we were talking. We had a day where somebody asked me, what does FAQ stand for? What is that? And it led to an entire conversation about acronyms and words we use in English. And so this was kind of some review of that activity. So once I've made the quiz, which I'll show you how to do that in just a second, I actually go to practice. Rather than assigning the quiz for each student to take individually, I go to practice and then we take it together as a class. Because my students aren't as comfortable with technology, this works really well in the class. So I name us like AM class or PM class, those are my classes, and we play. So let me just show you how we would play. So here's the first question, and I'll actually call on a student. I'll say, A, can you answer this one? What does LOL mean? Turn this down. Okay, there we go. And that student would say, oh, it's blue, or laughing out loud. Boom. And then we would continue to play. And each time I often call on a different student just to double check. My students know they can always pass or they can also ask for help. So that's the way we do it all together. And because my classes are high flex, that means that I also have the chance to ask the people at home and in the classroom the answer to the questions. There are times where you can try to answer in teams, but you need a little bit longer of a time to do that. So you can set your quiz to have maybe 1 minute or 2 minutes if you want to do teams answering together. There are also times where maybe I introduce a material, and if I'm introducing a material through a Kahoot, then I will ask for volunteers. I'll say, does anybody know this? Have you learned this before? So this is how I would use the Kahoot. So we can do one more, right? So if they get it wrong, it's going to be the same thing. You're just going to keep going through them, but you would then explain why, and you have all the answers right here to explain. So I'm going to go back to the main page. We're going to leave this particular Kahoot because I want to show you how this works. So when you're in Kahoot, you can create your own quizzes. I personally have the free version, which just means I can't put really cool pictures up. Cool shape cards for students. Oh, awesome. But I'm fine with that because I find the free one is good enough for my needs. So you can just come here and you can create a Kahoot basically on any subject. So you're working on adjectives, you want to practice vocabulary, whatever it is, you have a lot of options with this to create quizzes. And when you're doing it, as I said, you can write the question, write the answer, write how long the students have, all in that format. The other tool I love to use is Discover. If you go to Discover, there are just hundreds and hundreds of quizzes. And it's actually really nice because some of those people have the premium version, so they have really nice pictures already. So that's my big tip is I love to like basically copy and then change the quizzes that have already been made because of their visuals. They're really nice. So I've just looked up adjectives. I can see quite a few quizzes that have already been made. And you can, as I said, copy it, and then you will have to double check it. Some of these are made by students. Some are made maybe in other countries where they use British English. So you'll want to check spelling and all of those things just to make sure it fits your needs. But it's pretty fast when you take a quiz that's already been made and just, yeah, update it. So we can come see here. Ooh, they've changed this a little bit. Some of them are now paid, but some of them you can access without paying for. Okay, here we go. Here's one you can access without paying for. So I would go in, I would choose that one, and then I could actually just edit it and make it my own and change it however I want. So if I go now to my homepage, I actually have about 70 Kahoots I've created throughout the time I've been teaching that I can go back to, I can update anytime I would like. So that is Kahoot. It's really fun for students. I love it for warm-ups. I find that, you know, students tend to come in a little late. So starting with a Kahoot is a really great way to just get started all together while students still are coming in. So it's a great activity. The next one I want to talk about is WordWall. Once again, if you've used WordWall before, give me a thumbs up or let me know. Yes, some yes, a little bit of no. Okay, so this is a series of games that you can make and play with students as a group. A note on this, the free version only allows you to make 5 games. So I recommend maybe making one of each game. Well, there's more than 5, but you can make different games and then adjust it to your needs as you would like. I personally have actually 2 accounts. I have with my personal email and my work email. I have 2 different accounts, so I actually kind of have 10 games. But it just works out because it's really a fun activity for students. So here's one way we use it quite often, usually as a warm-up. It is a, let me make it a little bigger and move it down. It is a wheel with lots of multisyllabic words on it. And so we will spin the wheel and then just practice our pronunciation. As we struggle with words in a class, when we do reading or things like that, we add it to the wheel. And this is actually something that was requested by students, so I made for them because they really wanted to practice more pronunciation for words that they weren't used to. And it's a really great tool for students in that you're controlling the technology, right? Going back to that point, they're not always comfortable with technology depending on the student. So you're controlling the technology, which lets them focus on the game. And it also makes the class run smoother a bit. Okay. Okay, awesome. So Phil was just telling me that sometimes you can actually change the display for a different way without using one of your 5 games. Yes, and that's actually what I usually do, Phil, I think, if I'm understanding you correctly, because I will make a wheel and then I will change it all the time. So I won't keep it the same. I just constantly change it. Because basically you set the kind of the form, but then you can change it after that. So let me show you in Oops.
With
We're,
some of those, you take one game that you've done and just change the way it's played.
say it again, Phil.
You can take a game with your creating
Yeah.
and like a matching game, if
Mm.
it's one of those matching games, and you can change it to
Yes.
the balloon drop game, which is the same game, just a
Oh,
different set. And it
okay.
does not count against your five uh, game.
Okay, perfect. So if I wanted, I could take the will and change it to the matching game
I
or
don't know what
something.
I don't know what the wheel does, but things like a matching game,
Mhm.
uh, translations or numbers or whatever,
Mm.
and then it comes to the balloon drop. You can make it the balloon drop, or you can make it one or two of the other games
Okay.
without. So play with that. It's kind of over on the right hand side of the display when you do it.
Okay. Over in create activity, probably. So
Yeah.
I can show that now then. So if we go to create activity, you can see all of these different activities that you can make with your students. So there's 18 different activities from match, quiz, the will, anagram, unjumble, chase game, true or false, a balloon pop. So lots of different games that you can make and use with your classes. I'm going to show you just a couple of the ones I have made. I've showed you one of the wills already. Here's another will I made for past tense verbs. And so this is how it would look and how I would use it in class. So in my class, we're used to it. I'm going to call on an individual student and say the next word is for you. And then I'll spin the will. So in this activity, all of the words are in the present tense, but I wanted them to tell me the irregular past tense verb. So they would see the word and they would tell me built in the past tense. And we would go through that as a class. So once again, a really fun warm up. That's often what I use these for, although you could use them for review activities as well. A couple of other activities I've done. Let me back up and show you. There's this adjectives game with the whack-a-mole. A little hard to do all as a group, but it's fun. I have adjectives and adverbs, and they have to shout out the adjectives for me, and I only will hit those. So as a class, it can be a little crazy, lots of shouting, but it still turns out fun. The other activity I have is looking at vocabulary. This was a review activity. Once again, we were talking about, we did this lesson from Ellie on like benefits at jobs, and that led to a very deep discussion on some vocabulary that they didn't know about. They had a lot of questions about retirement and things like that. So I created this quiz for us to review that vocabulary. And so in order to play it, we would all together get a definition and then have to decide, okay, which of these is the correct definition after we've learned about this material. So an after-tax retirement account in the US is a IRA. And then we would just go through this game together. So there are lots of games and a lot of ways to use them, which is the beauty of WordWall. So let me come back over here. I want to quickly come up and make sure I send you links to those two activities. So here is Kahoot. I'm sending that from before. And let me send you WordWall. You will need to sign into WordWall. You'll have to open an account, but let me go to the home and send you that. Okay, I'm just going to quickly look, see if there's any questions. Okay, I think we're okay. So let me go back to my presentation here. All right, so the next game is Jenga. So the history with this is that my classroom, the last day of class, every term we have a party for the second half of class, and we have a potluck, we play games, and we just talk in English and kind of have a fun day for part of class. And Jenga is my students' favorite game. So it's become a staple of the class. And so I've turned it now into a game that we can incorporate into class. So for this activity, you do need a Jenga board. Pieces of wood or something maybe could work, but just get a Jenga board. I think it's maybe easier. Maybe you can find it used. And then you need some flashcards for the grammatical concept or vocab that you want to work on. They can be digital. So if any of you have Ellie already, you could potentially use some of their pre-made flashcards. If a different program you have has flashcards, you could use those as well. But you can also make your own. So in order to play this game, decide what objective you have. It can be a pronunciation challenge, vocabulary, or grammatical. Once you have those flashcards ready, then you are going to play the game with students. So let me give you an example of the flashcards first, actually. So I already showed you the game with the irregular past tense verbs. You could do the same thing, but with Jenga, right? So you could have the present tense, the base form verbs on note cards, and then you could give one to a student and say, you need to tell me this word in the irregular simple past tense. If students get it wrong, they have to move the Jenga block. If they get it right, they can choose someone else in class to move the Jenga block for them. And of course, the game ends when somebody knocks it over. Because my class is high flex and some people are at home, if they get it wrong, I am punished. The teacher has to move it. I have to move it for them. If they get it right, they get to assign a different student to move it instead. So we have a way to actually connect and get the students involved who are at home, even though they can't actually do the moving themselves. And one thing I love about this activity, because my classes are multi-level, I have levels 3 through 6 in my class right now. It depends on the term. So you can actually use different note cards, some for lower levels, some for higher levels. You could also make it more of a team group where you have higher level supporting, or not supporting, but in a way supporting and helping teach the lower level students. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can set this up in the classroom. Okay. So one other activity I want to share that I love to do in class is bingo. So once again, this is a great authentic material because it gives you the chance to talk about bingo. Some of my students have gone to bingo games, they know it, but every term there are students who've never heard of bingo before and they don't know about it. So you can use bingo cards to teach a wide variety of topics. Once again, one of the fun parts about this. And like Jeopardy, you can talk about the culture, show videos of the culture through this. And I love to use this as an icebreaker, a review, or just a way to expand on current knowledge. So take something they've already learned a bit about and build on that knowledge. I personally purchased this book. Oh no, we can't see it. How do I make it come? I can't turn around. Oh, you can see it on the screen since it won't show. So it's this great big book of bingo, and it's got a lot of cool games. Oh gosh, okay. So the games include sports bingo, pronunciation bingo, gestures bingo, icebreaker bingo, and I personally bought it on Thrift Books for $7 maybe. It's also on Amazon. It's a little dated, but I find it still a really great resource for having the materials already made for teachers who are potentially, I think, all as busy as, I think we're all busy, right? So there's not always enough time to create your own, because you can also just create your own, but because you want each card to be different, it's nice to have them already made for you. I actually just did this with my students 2 weeks ago, and we played clothing bingo. I'm making it bigger on the screen for you. And this was a really interesting game because I thought, okay, they probably maybe know all these words. It's going to be review. Some of my students who I mentioned have been here over 35 years. There were a lot of words they didn't know. In both of my classes, none of the students had ever heard the word gown. which was quite surprising to me. They just didn't know it. They did know all the basics, right? They had learned pants, shirt, things like that before. But they actually ended up having a lot of questions, and we had a really great conversation in both of my classes about specific words we use for like things like turtleneck, loafers, and just different specific names that we use in our culture that they don't necessarily learn because they just learn, you know, shirt, pants, things like that. So, any questions so far? Okay. So I wanted to quickly mention, because part of this, if you are doing this in your classes, that puts a lot of pressure on the teacher. You need to be able to gamify your classes, right? Because otherwise, how do you run the technology? So I think more and more we as teachers have to be comfortable with technology. So I think these are pretty basic, but they're the tips that I have used for myself, because I'm constantly trying to improve my own technological use. So I've used LinkedIn Learning. If you have access through your employer, that's a really great resource. It does cost money. So if you don't have access through an employer, there will be MOOCs that you can use as well. Those open courses through Coursera. There's quite a few different companies that you can use those through to increase your computer skills. So I know I've done a few courses on technology in the last couple of years just to continue trying to improve. These days, I feel like we are so lucky because we have access to YouTube and all of their online resources that you can use for teaching Zoom, things like that. Yeah. And also you can, one of the biggest tips I have, because you never have enough time as a teacher, is to block out a chunk of time that is meant for you to actually improve your technology skills. I find that otherwise I don't do it because there's always things that are more important, I guess. But continuously building your comfort using technology, I think, is worth the time. Even if you just say, okay, once a term, I'm gonna spend a couple hours on a program, something so that I'm building my skills. Another really great idea, I think, is if you're having PLCs at your institution, which I'm sure most or all of you are, to try to complete some teacher training within your PLC as a way to make sure everyone in the department feels comfortable. And this is coming from my own experience. I know when I started my current job, there was no training. There were some difficulties, and it makes the path as a teacher sometimes more difficult. So if there's any way to kind of smooth that for you as a department, be it through using these, you know, free materials or finding ways to connect to others who learn together with them, I think it's a great idea. And this is also based on the fact that you need access to certain resources to gamify your classrooms. Like, especially if you're high flex or online. If you are just in the classroom, obviously you still need resources, but not this technology. But having the technological piece of things gives you so many opportunities in class. Like, I know I just played with Burlington English. This week we played Connect 4 as a class using Burlington English, right? And another way that we are able to play the games together and learn through gamification. So
Casey, we have about 4 minutes left. Do you want to describe a little bit more? The one question that we had is, what is a high flex classroom? So maybe you can take a minute to describe what it looks like.
Yeah, well,
that's a big one.
It looks like students being, I'm not sure what else to say. I'd love some more specific information on what the student is, or sorry, the person is looking for.
Can I ask the question? I think I asked the question.
Yes.
What is your setup? Like, what's in your classroom?
Okay, yeah. So I have a few cameras and a desktop computer, and I am able to turn cameras on me, the board, and the students. So I am able to change the view so the students at home are able to see me, or the students in the classroom, depending on the activity that we're doing. So I'm often in front of the classroom, but I can still send students at home into breakout rooms while the students in the classroom are meeting in groups as well. Yeah, does that answer your question? Oh gosh, can you unmute for a sec, Patrick?
Can I shadow your class?
Probably.
I mean, I really would love to see this both with the games, because it can be really complex to create an interactive space where people are in a virtual space and people in a physical space, and you're there and you're displaying stuff on a screen.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, dang, that is some like, that's some conductor orchestration stuff. I like, I mean, wow, I would love to see it. So I don't know if anyone else feels the same way, but.
Well, thank
That's
you
like,
for the compliment.
Yeah, because it's ninja level. That's what it is.
Well, I think we have
Seriously?
no choice in a way, because we're a rural area. We were actually switching over to this. COVID was kind of easy for us in a way, because they were already switching over to this, because we have students coming from 45 minutes, an hour away, and not able to drive every day to campus in the winter. So in some ways we were lucky to have already been moving in that direction. I came on board during COVID. So it was already set up like this, because in a rural community, this is the needs of the community, that some of it be high flex. So I've heard a lot of people say like they're going in either online or in the classroom. That's their direction. For us, it looks like we're going to stay at high flex, because that's the need of the students. And it definitely can be challenging, because you know, especially with the digital literacy piece, you're trying to make sure everyone has the knowledge. And I mean, I make videos for the students on how to use the technology and try to show them. But when you're not comfortable with technology, they end up feeling like it's not good enough. So it's never a perfect setup, but I think it does the greatest good for our community with, you know, the resources that we have, because we have so many students who are able to, like, you know, stay-at-home moms who are able to attend class and whatnot through, you know, attending on Zoom. So I think it's a really great thing for our particular community. It certainly can be stressful for the instructor, but I think that it also creates lots of opportunities to be creative, which is kind of fun as a teacher. Does anybody else have questions? I realize we're like out of time. So
yeah, but talk about like perfect timing, Casey. Very well done.